Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Amanda and today I want to talk to you about Matthew McConaughey's Greenlights. Now, I don't have a physical copy of the book because I actually downloaded the audiobook version that Matthew McConaughey narrates himself. The book was released just, 4 or 5 months ago. I think it was October, November of last year. And it's a memoir, but it's not a typical sort of salacious memoir that one of these kind of bubbly little Hollywood types wrote. It's actually kind of raughty in places, very honest in places, and surprisingly introspective and intelligent in my opinion. I didn't know Matthew McConaughey actually before I started listening to this book. I had seen his movies, obviously, the great movies like A Time to Kill, Dallas Buyers Clubs, some of the more guilty pleasure movies like The Wedding Planner and Failure to Launch, and of course we knew him from the famous Naked Bongos incident from 1999, which he does briefly touch on in the book, by the way. But I didn't really know him as a person, and I don't know that I'd given him much thought. He was just kind of a Frankenstein monster that was stitched together based on caricatures from his previous roles, kind of stitched together, and that was who I thought he was in my head. But wow, this book really helped me understand who he is as a person and was surprising in its tenderness and its honesty and its emotion. The book is a memoir, but it's not really a tell-all. He does talk about coming to terms with fame and his mom stealing the spotlight, and he touches on some of his relationships, but he doesn't do it in an Entertainment Tonight sort of news magazine type of way. He does it in a more authentic, these are the building blocks that helped make me who I am today kind of way. And it comes across as very genuine and wholehearted. The book itself is set up in sort of sequential chapters that start out sort of the beginning of his childhood and kind of take him through present day. He even touches a little bit on COVID and how COVID has changed our lives. I think for me, the beginning of the book started out a little bit slowly. He actually does acknowledge that his childhood was definitely not traditional. He grew up in rural Texas in a manner that some might actually consider abusive. His parents didn't have a traditional relationship. They divorced twice and remarried each other 3 times, which is kind of strange. As I said before, I downloaded the audiobook version and I'm really glad that I did. I think being able to hear the sort of genuine emotion, the humor, the heart, the love, and the affection in his voice as he recounts some of these memories makes the words sort of jump off the page, and I think paints an illustrative picture that I don't know that I would have gotten if I had just read the book version. I also have to say his energy and enthusiasm as he reads through his story it's contagious, absolutely contagious. Now, the genesis of this book actually convey details from his childhood that he kept in journals that he's been writing since his early teenage years. As he detailed some of the stories through his later teenage into high school years, those stories were actually what started to resonate with me. The first story I found pretty interesting was the story as he talked about transitioning from a truck into kind of a hot rod car. I think when he had the all beat up truck, he parked it in a really prominent place in the high school lot, and it had a bullhorn, and he used to yell things at cute girls, and he was like the center of attention and was like right in the middle of things. And he sold his truck and he bought this hot rod sports car, and he thought he was gonna be like hot stuff because he had this really cool car, but he parked the car kind of over in the back lot. He didn't want to away from everyone because he didn't want it to get dinged or scratched or anything like that. And he realized that he wasn't really the center of the social scene anymore. And he actually had the wherewithal and in his teenage years to comprehend that it was because he'd physically removed himself from all of the action and all of the activity that was going on in school. And I thought that was an insight into kind of human behavior I don't know that I would have had when I was in high school. I probably would have taken it personally, maybe sulked a little bit. I don't know that I would have had the maturity to understand. hey, it's because of my new car and the fact that I'm removing myself because I want to be with the car and not my classmates. And this is why a change has sort of happened. I found that kind of emotional maturity at kind of a young age to be pretty admirable. The book is also littered with what he calls bumper stickers, little one-sentence philosophies for life that are conveyed pretty quickly. Some have deep meanings, some of them are just really silly and funny. One that resonated particularly with me: it's not about winning or losing, but about, do you accept the challenge? And I found this to be the way that Matthew McConaughey lives his life, is accepting the challenge and always looking for something that's going to stimulate and grow, help him to grow as a person. I also loved how he can own his accomplishments. I think when I was growing up, my accomplishments were not something to be bragged about or talked about. They were always something to be downplayed. He doesn't downplay them. He doesn't brag about them either. He just owns it. He talks a little bit about, in this, about being a brand ambassador for Buick Lincoln, I guess, and how his Lincoln ads were parodied quite a bit, and a lot of people made fun of him, but he also acknowledged, we sold a lot of cars. But he does this in such a way that it's not bragging, it's just saying, hey, this is what I did. I sold a lot of cars as a brand ambassador. It was owning his accomplishments without needing his accomplishments to fuel his ego. I also found it interesting that his career, I always thought, you know, actors, I mean, they do work, but I assumed most of it was kind of talent, but Matthew McConaughey has absolutely intentionally designed his career. And he talks a little bit about, in this book, actually he talks a lot about Wooderson, his very first big role with Richard Linklater in Dazed and Confused. And it was a small role that actually became a bigger role as he truly sort of embodied Wooderson. And so a lot of his dialogue was improvised because he knew who Wooderson was, and Richard Linklater just let him go. And so that was his kind of approach to his roles, and it was his approach to Hollywood initially. And he got some roles because he just sort of knew who the characters were and he embodied them. And then he talked about getting, I think, a little bit too cocky, and he got a role, and it was a smaller role, and he just knew the character. So when he got the script, he didn't bother to read it. Like, I got this, not a problem. He shows up to shoot, and he's literally standing on his mark, ready for the cameras to roll, when he takes a quick peek and he realizes that he has a 4-page monologue in Spanish that he has not even a little bit come to memorize. So he says he actually has never seen that movie. So I'm assuming that his role did not come across really all that great. But it was there that he decided to take his craft a little bit more seriously. And then after taking some acting classes, he stopped getting roles. He was continuing to get auditions, but he stopped getting roles. And he realized that he kind of swung the pendulum the opposite way, and he'd become a little bit too stiff, a little bit too studious. And so he really sort of had to find that happy swing between that improv, I know my character, and that kind of studious to really become the trained actor that he became. And he got his foot in the door with some rom-coms, and he was a tremendous hero for Hollywood in that role, but it didn't stimulate him after a while. He'd been doing it for a number of years, and he was really looking for something more challenging. So he took a 2-year step back from Hollywood. He turned down all of the rom-com roles that he was offered, and that was all he was offered, until he could sort of reinvent himself. And a couple years later, Hollywood sort of rediscovered him as a serious actor who could take on roles like Magic Mike and Mud and Dallas Buyers Club. And so he sort of intentionally took his career in a little bit of a different direction, which I thought was pretty interesting, that he could be so prescriptive about what he wanted and not settle until he really got it. And it seems to me that he's kind of there. He's absolutely gotten to where he wanted to be. So this book is full of crazy life adventures and fun stories. It's also full of faith and family and a little bit of heartbreak, and an account of what Matthew McConaughey actually finds important in his life. are pieces of his life so far out of the frame of context of my life that it was kind of a reach for me to really understand him? Yeah, absolutely. But did it diminish my enjoyment of the book? No, not really. And I think there was enough meat on the bones there for an introspective girl like me that his lessons and his perspective really gave me some food for thought and really helped me in reflections of my life in particular as well. In one part of the book, he has a prayer, and the prayer, I'm gonna read it, and the prayer is, when I cross the truth, give me the awareness to receive it, the conscious to recognize it, the presence to personalize it, the patience to perceive it, and the courage to live it. It's a really interesting book, and I think it's worth a read, or in my case, it's worth a listen. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know in the comments below if you've read the book and if you agree with my thoughts or if you have different thoughts. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.